What's going on, everybody? My name is Hasia Muhammad, and you're listening to The Actor's Instrument. On today's episode, we've got a very special guest. Alicia Rodis was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and attended Wright State University for acting, but her work on over 15 different TV series, which include The Deuce, Watchmen, Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, High Maintenance, and Lovecraft Country, are not credits for acting, but for intimacy direction. That's right, today's episode is all about the ins and outs of the role of the intimacy director in our industry and tips for actors who might have the opportunity to work with these unsung heroes. Now, what makes Alicia such a special guest? Well, when it comes to intimacy direction, her insight is pretty great to have because, she invented it. In 2015, Alicia co-founded the not-for-profit Intimacy Directors International with Tonia Sina. And in 2018, she made history when she was hired by HBO to coordinate on The Deuce, making Alicia the first ever intimacy coordinator in television history. Today, she serves as the resident intimacy coordinator for HBO, where they keep her insanely busy. So I couldn't be more grateful that she's taken the time to join us on the show today.
The writer's strike, man. It's just like every schedule just got thrown to the wind over and over again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just got a DM from a set dresser yesterday that I know. And she was like, they got us. We're shut down.
Yeah.
Because I think for a minute, some sets were kind of working in the cut, as we would say, just so people didn't know that, because they're trying to avoid the picket lines and things. So last minute set change, which I know you were experiencing as well.
Oh, yeah. Like literally, like we're shooting at a location. Picketers showed up. We're pivoting to the stage. Get to the stage. We're doing your scene today. Like
Jesus.
Stuff like that. I mean, we had, I'll keep this brief so I know we got to get going, but like we had a scene that was on a bridge up in Poughkeepsie that we were shooting at, and we had, and we got everyone like there before the picketers showed up, and as they're filming the scene, they hear this bullhorn go off, and they're like, where's this siren? Where's this like bullhorn going off? And they look under the bridge is a picketer in a canoe.
No.
Going down the river and just is holding like a bullhorn, setting it off, and just puts it down and holds up a WGA sign. And we were like, you know what? Respect. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
When we held until she floated away, and then we started again. That's
in a canoe.
Canoe.
They got the water force going. The WGA, they got their own Navy now. Okay.
Yep. It was something.
Wow.
It was something. So yeah, that's the level we're at, where we're just like, who knows what's going to happen today?
Right. Man, yeah, I mean, what a time to be alive, right? What a time to be an actor. For many reasons, the industry has changed so much over the years. 10, 20, even 5 years ago, what it meant to be an actor is drastically different from what it means to be an actor today. And not just the, formats or mediums that we're asking to be performing in, like social media, streaming, but also I think what's being asked of us within our performances has changed, which is why I've asked you to be on this show, because, as I was brainstorming for this podcast, The Actor's Instrument, I was like, okay, what are all the things that the actors have to bring to the table? And you have all of your standard stuff that I'm not going to get into right now. But the thing that came to mind after we worked together last year was intimacy, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, well, first of all, I know this to be true. You're the only intimacy coordinator I've ever worked with, right? So it can't be too mainstream yet.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more on breakdowns and things that, the producing teams are having intimacy coordinators on set and that kind of thing. But, 5-10 years ago, that certainly wasn't the norm. Actors were just kind of doing the stuff on the fly, following their impulses. Yeah, so I think your job is particularly interesting to me. The fact that we're being asked to work with intimacy coordinators now, and for a lot of actors, probably over the next few years, there's going to be a lot of firsts, right? Their first time working with an intimacy coordinator, their first time having to choreograph these moments that before you would just, do what came to mind. And not to say, well, we can get into it, but not to say that actors were truly doing things willy-nilly.
Sure.
But you didn't have that person to say, like, okay, let's talk about this. Boom, 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 boom. So, yeah, I just thought you'd be somebody who would be really amazing for my audience to be hearing from.
Yeah, happy to.
Awesome. So I would love to, well, first of all, I'm just curious about your trajectory getting into this space, because you were an actor, a fight choreographer, stunt performer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you literally pioneered the intimacy coordinator role in the United States.
Yeah, I was one of the first. I was one of the first, and I ended up, I always say, right place, right time, right set of skills. There were a lot of things that sort of folded into the space-time continuum that made all of this happen at this one time. So I started, grew up as an actor, got into the theater as a kid and got very involved, was a dancer, as I was growing up. And when I started to go through puberty, when I hit like maybe 13, 14, I started getting cast as the slutty best friend, and this is like from musical theater roles, like if there was an Ado Annie being cast, I was being cast as her. And I have that character actor look, always had, and developed very early. And I will say I never felt uncomfortable with it. I was always in, or at least I was, and I should say I was so lucky in a lot of ways that I was asked to play these sexually forward roles from a young age, and I wasn't ever put into a situation where I felt like I was in danger. And even when it was even when as I got older, I got asked to do intimacy and perform intimacy, because I had been asked to do this from such a young age, I sort of had my own little palette of tools that I brought with me. And I know, even just in talking with some directors from back then now, they were like, oh, we loved working with you because we knew you would speak up and you would tell us what was going on and what you wanted to do. But that was all on me, and not every actor is like that. So as I got older and I started, I went to college for acting, I went to Wright State, and that trajectory continued with what I was cast as. I started to get really into physical theater. I started to really get into stage combat. Like I said, I grew up dancing and doing some martial arts. So that was a natural progression for me. And I loved stage combat because it also forced me to recognize the now of performing.
Yeah.
Like even just cue action reaction and cue reaction action. It was like it just forced me to be in the moment more so than a lot of other styles had forced me to do. So I took to it, and I started to work professionally, like on summer stock and stuff like that. And I started to get put into situations where it was like, no, I'm comfortable doing this work, but you're not giving me much to go on as far as what you want from me and what you want me to do. And the whole just go for it scenario kept coming up for me. And again, thank God I wasn't put in any situations where I got into danger, but I definitely had the risk was there and was higher.
Right.
So, I ended up moving to New York. I started to continue the world of stage combat, getting into fight direction. Some of my fight folks ended up getting into some stunt work. I started to do some light stunt work. And with the fight work I was doing, I kept getting called in to work on sexual assault scenes. And I was sort of floored that, I was like, of course, I'm going to come in with a holistic approach. I'm going to come in with like, making sure I chat with everyone beforehand and see, how, and make sure everyone knows how we're going to approach this.
Yeah.
But it just floored me that we didn't have a process or a more considered process going forward when we came to sexual assault scenes in scenes of violence. I started eventually working for NYU and helping out with stunts on their student films. And I had a student come to me and, we were doing some of the stunt stuff. And this is really just very early in my career. I was still learning how everything worked. But I'm like, I can still come in and choreograph a slap and do anything I would do for stage for these small films.
Yeah.
And she said, I've got a sex scene coming up. How do we handle it? And I was like, well, let's look at what SAG-AFTRA has, what our processes are that we have. And I look and I'm like, there's nothing. I was like, okay, let's treat this like the stunt we just did. Let's talk to the actors ahead of time. Let's make sure we know exactly what our plan is. Let's have padding. Let's have, everything set so that then we can, and make sure we coach it so that it's coached up just like we coached up the violence in your last film.
Yeah.
And, it was incredible. It ended up being this phenomenal experience. And I started to bring that to the stage. And I worked on a theater piece at Pace, and I remember there was a slap. It was Look Back in Anger, and there was a slap and a kiss, and we figured out the slap. The slap looked great, and it got to the kiss, and both actors are like, shoulders up, like, what do we? And it turns out it was a freshman and a senior that was working together. They didn't know each other. There was power dynamics involved, and I was like, why don't we look at this the same way we just looked at this slap? What's our point of contact? How long are we executing this for? How are we doing this? And, I found out that there was a woman named Tonia Sina who had coined the phrase intimacy choreography and was working on intimacy work. And so I contacted her. She was like, hey, I'm actually going to be in New York next week. We met up at her friend's place in Brooklyn, and we ended up talking for like 4.5 hours. And she was like, I don't want to be a lone wolf anymore. I want to kind of start a company and start working this out and putting it down on paper. I was like, she's like, do you want to help? It's like, you bet.
Boom.
You absolutely bet. And she was all theater, and I was dabbling in film and television at the time. And so I sort of brought a lot of the film and television stuff. And her and I and Siobhan Richardson all started working together. We created Intimacy Directors International. And we started to get like some like bites. People were like, oh, this is really interesting. And we created the pillars and we started devoting time to it. But people were still like, we don't have the money for it. Nah, it's a good idea, but whatever. And then it was very specific in the timing. Trump got elected. And I bring this up because it was such a cultural shift where people went, oh my God, this is us.
Yeah.
Especially in the arts. And I remember Trump getting elected, and the next day it was like a funeral in New York City. Everyone had their heads down. It was raining. It was terrible. And I flew to Canada that day to go do like a 4-day retreat with Tonia and Siobhan in Canada. And we were just like, oh, wow, we have a lot of work to do. And the phone started ringing. And then we started to evolve. We started to get more attention. And then Me Too happened. And that was when the wave just crested. And people were like, okay. I got a call from the UPM on the Deuce maybe 2 weeks later. And I was speaking at Juilliard a week later. And it all just started happening.
Wow. So, wow, you meant it when you said the right place, right time.
Yeah.
Like quite literally these monumental, I never thought about it in that respect, just what was happening in the cultural zeitgeist at the time.
Yeah. I don't know if we were either, but like it just started to, you could feel the shift happening. And thank God we had gotten together like a year before and started doing our research and started setting down like how we wanted this to work, because all of a sudden the need was huge. It was out there.
And I guess similar to what you said at the top of your story, like I have a bit of surprise in that the need was always there, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it unfortunately, fortunately, it took these huge moments in our culture, in our society, these major shifts for our industry to realize the value. But there's been intimacy in film and on stage for as long as they've existed.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, that's, I don't harp on the stories anymore, because at first we really needed the stories of how awfully things happened to sort of get people to come on board and realize this is a safety need. But, you know, I think it also doesn't do us service to forget them or ignore them, that people got, you know, and yes, sometimes things went fine. And sometimes things went really, really rough, and people left the industry for it. People were traumatized for it. You know, people were assaulted for it. And the tough thing, you know, and I try not to harp on that now, because it also doesn't, if anything, sometimes it makes people retreat further back from it, because they're like, well, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. It's like, there are things that we did not know at the time and we know now. We can't go back and force our former selves to know. I did things. I mean, I did moves, 10, 20 years ago that I look back now and I'm like, oh, that was not consent forward at all.
And listen, I mean, like you said, you don't like to harp on the stories. Look, we're all a product of our time.
Yeah.
We all are. The most progressive of us are. In 50 years, when we're all boomers and our grandkids or whatever are looking at us like, oh my God, you guys used to do what?
Yeah.
You know, we thought we were so forward thinking, 2023, So listen, we're all a product of our time. And you're right. It's sometimes, I mean, I'm a personal believer that everything in the world has balance. And sometimes you need to know those stories of what didn't go well in order to craft and to curate your process for how to make sure that they go well from here on out.
Yeah.
So speaking of your craft, because I think of intimacy coordinators and choreographers as craftspeople.
Is it?
What's it like being the resident coordinator for HBO?
It's wild. It's wild.
I mean, you're working on such diverse content. Pretty Little Liars, Insecure, The Gilded Age. Talk about intimacy through time, right? What's it like working for them?
I think my lucky stars that I came from a theater background. I can't speak to it enough. I would not be where I am at all if it wasn't for the theater, and having that experience of Shakespeare, of Chekhov, Ibsen, Shaw, of all of that classical training that allows me, and then going into contemporary theater so that I can show up on the Gilded Age and know what universe we're in, and without much prep, and then I can pop in, not that I don't, because I certainly do plenty, and then be able to pop into, I know this much is true, and Insecure, and be like, okay, I know what universe we're in.
Right. Well, let's talk about your prep, your process. So HBO calls, a new show's been ordered to series, and there's, they feel like they're in need of an intimacy coordinator. What's your process for, I guess, probably it starts when you get the script, right?
Yeah. Well, it's even before that. So for my job at HBO, I chat with the production executive and usually the creator and like a producer before we even are getting into, like, we usually are in prep, even sometimes before we're in prep, and are like, okay, where are you shooting? What's the content? How much intimacy are you looking at? And, if it's a show based in Vancouver and they're like, we've got a good amount of intimacy that's, sprinkled throughout the season, be like, great. I've got some folks in Vancouver. I'm going to recommend you some folks, but also let me take a look at the first couple of scripts. Let me see what you're working on, and then I connect them with people that they can hire, and then I connect with the folks that they decide to hire. I make sure that they are up on everything, that they're getting all of their prep work, they're getting everything they need, because this is still a new profession. Making sure that they're still getting the access that they need and the process is going well. And I coach and mentor those intimacy coordinators through their process. Now, if it's and then sometimes they're like, no, we want you. And it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to Vancouver. So that is, like that happens.
Okay. So as a resident coordinator, you are, okay. So it's similar to how fight coordinators work or stunt coordinators work, where you're kind of head of department.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily the person, you may be the coordinator, but somebody else is doing the choreography.
No, usually if it's if someone is billed as the intimacy coordinator, they're on set. Like, I don't bill myself. Like The Last of Us was on. I worked really closely with Lindsay Summers, helping her out, making sure she had everything on set. She was the intimacy coordinator for that show. But I was just overseeing from the HBO perspective. Now, when I am intimacy coordinating, I'm working on Pretty Little Liars right now. I just finished up, and just like that, season 2, which is the Sex and the City reboot. I have my meeting with the production executive, the showrunner, a couple of producers beforehand. I'm like, hey, talk to me about your show. What's the world? How much intimacy are we talking about? And they give me a rundown of like what they're looking at. And sometimes the scripts aren't written. We have the first few scripts,
Sure.
but we don't have all of them. But we at least have a trajectory of where people are going, where the plot is going, and where the characters are going. And then I'm like, okay, send me your scripts. We'll start talking. I start reading the scripts. And so, my prep is going through the scripts, notating and this is much like a stunt coordinator, notating every bit of intimacy I see. More often than not now, also if I see some really heightened content, I may flag that as a conversation that I'll have too. We end up having a childbirth scene, a miscarriage scene, some heavy violence. I may note that. I might not be there on set for it, but I'm at least going to, in my prep with the actor, bring it up and talk to them and make sure that they're aware of it and we have a plan for that. But any intimacy, I notate, I check in with the showrunner and the and the producers about what type of intimacy they're looking for, and also what they need my expertise on. Because there are shows that, simple kissing scenes, they might be like, no, we've got it, we're fine, great. But anything that has nudity, simulated sex, I'm going to be there for it. And
Copy.
If there's a nudity or simulated sex rider, you need to have an intimacy coordinator there. I will say, more often than not these days, people want me for kissing scenes too, especially if there's an age, a power dynamic that's going on. But also, choreographing it out usually makes it a better story.
Yeah, it makes it kind of depersonalizes it, but in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like there are certain parts of our performance that I think we more easily can separate ourselves from as actors, to say, like, I'm just acting. Like, you can scream and yell at a person and call them all the worst names in the book, and then they call cut and you're like, oh, we're good.
Yeah.
But certain, acts of intimacy, even something as simple as a kiss, they call cut and it's like there's something still in the air.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, honestly, kissing scenes, I find more intimate than some of the simulated sex scenes that I've worked on.
Right.
It's like,
right.
We worked on The Deuce. I worked on The Deuce for 2 seasons. It's a show about the pornography industry. We had a crazy amount of sex scenes. We had a crazy amount of simulated porn scenes. And some of that was just like
Sure.
easy peasy for a lot of folks and a lot of the performers. But then when they had to kiss someone, it was like, oh, all right, let's talk about this.
And, and why do you think that is?
You know, I think
Is it
it's.
because
Go
you know,
ahead.
is it because the simulated sex is in fact simulated, like they are not in fact having sex, versus a kiss, even as simple as it is, but they're really kissing.
They're still kissing. There's still lip to lip contact. And, you know, oftentimes if you're doing a simulated sex scene and it's something like the simulated porn that we were doing in the Deuce, it is like we have padding between us, we are in this position. Of course that can bring stuff up, but usually after a couple of times of doing it, it's like, nope, this is what we're doing, this is how many times we're doing this is like you can depersonalize it, or at least we found depersonalizing it was easier. And kissing, uh there was breath, there was face, there, you're right. And the amount of Tonia always talked about this and I loved it, that the receptors that you have, like there's an influx of information when you kiss someone because you're not used to having your lips pressed against anything. And that influx of information is so overwhelming. It can be so overwhelming. Um, and you've got all senses as well: smell, touch, taste. Everything is involved.
What's going on, everybody? Hasiem here. I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. And if you haven't heard already, The Actor's Instrument is now a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. We're excited to continue to bring you the best industry insights and introduce you to new artists who are making it work. And with this partnership with Red Letter, we're excited to bring you even more content, live episodes, and Q&As. New episodes of The Actor's Instrument will drop every Tuesday. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check us out at theactorsinstrument.com and follow Actors Instrument Podcasts on all social media platforms so you never miss a beat.
What can actors expect when working through a piece of intimacy choreography with you? They arrive on set and they're like, all right, today is, and we can take an example as simple as a kissing scene. What can the actors expect when they step into that space with you?
Sure. So if I don't know the actors, I'm usually going to shoot a text beforehand and say, hey, I'm the intimacy coordinator for the show. We got a scene coming up on Tuesday. I make sure they know all of the information, because sometimes that can pass right by them. You don't know what casting's telling them or what their agent's telling them. So I'm like, hey, we've got this going on. I sort of like play AD. This is going on. This is the day that it's going on. Can you hop on the phone for a couple minutes and chat? And usually they're like, yep, cool. When's this time? How about this? Great. We hop on the phone. I introduce myself. I ask, have you worked with an intimacy coordinator before? Yes or no? Want to know how it went, how the process go for them, so that I can also show up with the best process for that person. And then say, do you know about the scene on Tuesday? Have you gotten to talk with the director about it? Have you gotten any information about it? Okay, so this has been my information that I got from the director. This is how we're shooting it. This is, let's say, it's a kiss that accelerates, that we're telling the story that they do end up having sex, but we don't see it. I'm going to say, want to make sure you know the story is that these two accelerate the kiss and then end up having sex, but we don't see it. We cut after about 10 seconds of action. Are you aware of that? How you feel about that? We're going to talk through the choreography when I get there, but is there anything I should know about ahead of time, or any thoughts you had ahead of time that you wanted to chat about? So, even giving space, and I might, even if they've been working with that actor for a while, be like, how has that been going with this actor? Is there, and just give space if there's anything they want to talk about or any concerns they have. We've got that space before we get there.
Right. And I remember when we were working together, what I was so, I guess, taken by surprise by was the way in which you treated kind of, obviously there's levels to intimacy, but also in some ways I felt like you treated it all the same. As in, like, the kiss scene, the actors had just as much, like, say-so and just as much agency in those scenes. Because it's expected, if you ask somebody to do a sex scene, to say, what aren't you comfortable with?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a gift. You got to ask that. How often do we ask that when it's like, all right, there's a kiss scene and the director's running rehearsal. He's like, all right, and then they kiss and da-da-da. And you kind of just blow past it. Whereas I remember working with you, you were like, okay, let's step into a different room. Just the two people. And I was like, wow. Like, again, before intimacy direction was a thing, it would just be, all right, guys, and yeah, go ahead, do the thing.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Right.
Hope it goes well.
Right. Are we in tech? Okay, kiss.
Yeah, like literally. And what I'm curious in your experience, because the show is called The Actor's Instrument, a big part of our instrument as actors, as you know, coming from an acting background, are our impulses, right? That is the most personal thing that we have to bring to the work, and they're derived from our experiences. What do you say to an actor who says that intimacy choreography stifles their impulses? And you don't have to be nice to that actor.
Well, I would first, because I have gotten this before from actors, like, oh, no, I don't want to choreograph it. I don't want to set it up. I want to go on impulse. I'm like, you know what? Cool. I'm down. I'm in. All that we need to do is set a container. And if we want to find the choreography organically, because we're going to have to repeat it eventually, regardless of it, it's like you can't go on an impulse to do something different every single time. We've got to shoot it at multiple angles.
Right.
So we're going to land on something. If you want to find that organically without us planning it out ahead of time, I'm here for it. But we got to set a container. So where are we not going? What's the playing space? Because you can play inside of a playing space. Anyone can do that. Like, and I literally had this argument. It's not an argument, but I had this interaction with a professor at a university that I went to go and do some of this work to. And they said, I said, we set our boundaries. And she said, in my class, there are no boundaries. I was like, no boundaries. And she was like, there are no boundaries. That stifles creativity. There are no boundaries. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Is it okay if one of your students punches the other student in the face and breaks their nose? Is that okay? She was like, and she, waited for a second and went, no. And I said, so there are boundaries. That's okay. That's okay. We have such magical thinking when it comes to acting. We can really get carried away with it. Of just anything can happen. It's like, no, not anything can happen.
Right.
That's okay. That's normalized. We just tend to not speak of it that way. So when someone says it stifles my creativity, I'm like, listen, you get to have your process. We can make this work within your process.
Right. And it's, man, I get brought back to the stage combat. Mm-hmm. We all understand that you can't just improvise a sword fight.
Right.
Like what you know what I'm saying? Like actors know we cannot show up on set or to rehearsal and a sword is placed in our hand and we go, yeah, don't worry, director, I got this.
Yeah.
They would look at us like we were crazy. But yet we assume that we can touch another person's body just based on how we're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, something as simple as nobody would say that it would just be fine to just smack some, or I don't know, maybe some people, I know some actors who wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take that one back. We'll say the punch in the face, right? Mm-hmm. We all understand you cannot just throw a haymaker at another actor on stage. So what makes you think that you could grope them or kiss them or, other things that we know actors have done on set, right? That we don't have to say out loud.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'm open to a world where it's like, listen, and I've worked on these sets where they're like, anything is in play. I am totally cool with, and I'm like, cool. So I'm just going to name some things and let me know how you feel with this. Touching of breasts. Okay, touching of buttocks. Okay, like the very furthest that I will go is be like, if anyone wants to touch someone else's genitals, we will have padding there. Why? Because it is against our union rules to have a sexual act happen on set. We're not
As
doing
it
that.
should be.
That's it. We're not shooting actual sexual acts. It's not pornography. Nothing wrong with porn. Nothing wrong with ethical pornography, but we're not doing that here. And that's
Right.
an agreement that all of us are making.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I really, when I hear people say, and people say in interviews like, oh, it stifles my creativity, I could never do intimacy coordination or work with an intimacy coordinator. I'm like, I more so want to zero in and just ask more questions about it, because I guarantee they haven't actually had the experience of it.
And so, kind of along this trend of the actor's experience working with you all, what rights do actors have when working on intimacy choreography? And, in terms of, does director have ultimate final say? What if an actor's uncomfortable with something that has been written in the script that they've been asked to do?
Yeah, so great question. So it begins in casting. Consent begins in casting. If you are auditioning for something, there should be, and this is what I try to do on my side with HBO, of like, what's in the casting, what's in the, even if we're casting background performers or day players to come in and do something that requires anything from kissing to simulated sex, nudity, it's got to be explicitly stated in the casting. And then if you are not down with that, you don't audition for it. You don't go out for it. It's
Right.
like, that's it. And the thing I try to put this out there, especially at universities that I go at, acting schools and such, that there will always be another show. There will be another show. That's not the show for you. That's not the part for you. It's cool. There will be another one. I promise. Because I guarantee they don't want to cast someone who's not okay with doing that thing. That's why they're putting it in there.
Right.
So no reason to go out for it. You've got other stuff. And then say you agree to something and you get cast. The actor's rights, it really comes down to if it's a union or a non-union show. If it's a union show, you have a right to withdraw your consent at any time. Even after you sign a nudity or simulated sex waiver, you can withdraw your consent. Now, that doesn't stop you from being recast, but you're
Sure.
not going to be forced on to set and say, no, you signed a contract, get in there. So that is a huge thing that also you can't have repercussions from. It's you have a right to say no at any point. And that is something that I often say as an intimacy coordinator of like, just so you know, if you want to stop, if you change your mind, just let us know. It's like, and I get producers sometimes that are like, I don't know if you should say that to people. And I'm like, here's the thing. Sometimes you're doing exteriors and it's going to rain. What do? You pivot. You either shoot in the rain and you figure out a way around it, or you shoot another day. And it's the same thing with someone's consent. That's how it goes. So you have a right to say no. I would say during the casting process, I tell actors, be inquisitive, be curious, ask the questions. Ask, how's this going to go? Do we have an intimacy coordinator? Ask what is being asked of you, from the specifics of nudity to the specifics of how they're going to shoot the scene. I think the more curious that you can be and the more you put out there, if you got an agent, talk through your agent. But if not, if you're even doing background work, talk to that background casting director and be like, hey, I just want to know what exactly is being asked of me so that I can bring my full self to it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've turned down quite a bit of auditions because of, the intimacy that was described in the script. I was like, I just know myself as a person. Like, if I was on set being asked, like, I would just be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I ask myself. And if it's a play, I'm like, would you be comfortable doing this 8 shows a week?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not
Yeah.
just sometimes it's not just like a one-off thing. You're like, oh, well, it's no big deal. And also, especially because you work in universities, young actors, if you've never done something before, you might not know how you actually feel about that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
so you may be saying, because a lot of actors were told, just take any job.
yeah.
Do it. If it's an opportunity, take it. Like, there's a scarcity mindset. Like you said, there's always another job. We're being fed that, like, there might not be another job.
Yeah.
So take this one. Do whatever you have to do. And, unfortunately, I feel like some actors end up in situations that if they felt like they had the agency, they maybe wouldn't have agreed to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something else I like to put out there to folks in acting school and in their university settings, college settings, like take the risks now. I am so grateful that we had a little black box student run theater when I went to school that, like, I did my first nude scene. I was 18 doing, a freshman in college, and we put on this like small little like student run, student written play, and they were like, it's a nude scene. I was like, now's the time to give it a shot and see if I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so grateful that we had that. I'm so grateful that I took those risks. And, I did nudity for like a couple of student films, and I remember being like, okay, so if I ever do this again, I need to know that I need this. Like, having those experiences early, where the stakes were less high. I could have been like, you know what, sorry guys, I'm out.
Right.
And it's,
right.
at the end of the day, it's a student film that I can walk away from. It's not a big deal. Like, I'm so glad that I had those opportunities. And when you're in the same, you are protected in a university setting in a lot more ways than you are in professional settings.
Yeah. And I feel like in both sides of that spectrum exist, for me, and everybody who knows me personally knows I'm a very religious person, right? So for me, like, again, there's just certain things that I feel like are against my moral code.
Yeah.
And again, there's this, I don't know if it's a stigma, but there is a bit of like I said, a culture of take any job that comes your way.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that the beautiful thing about our industry is the shift towards more inclusivity, right? And the shift away from types, right? And kind of the more of an individual you are, the better off you potentially could be, the better story that can be written around you, So that's what I tell a lot of people. It's like, at the end of the day, stay true to who you are.
Yeah.
Right? If you're that person that wants to take that risk and that's who you are, that's who you are. And if you're not, then you're not.
That's
you don't have
cool.
to. And I feel like I've seen actors who are trying to, and we're talking about intimacy here, but even actors who, like, listen, if you're the nerdy best friend, that's great. You don't have to, like, and I'm oversimplifying, but, I've seen people who are trying so hard to fit themselves into a particular box instead of just being themselves, right? And trusting that they know what's best for themselves. And it ends up backfiring because it's like, like we say, like, you can't hide from the camera. There's no secrets.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, if you're out there pretending to be something you're not, like, we see it from a mile away.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I bring something up from our working together that
Please
has
do.
to do with, so this was such a fantastic experience for me working on, I had a great time working on Three Musketeers. And when we met and chatted about the kissing scene that you were going to be doing, you said, I said, we're probably not going to kiss until we get to tech, but, we'll talk through it. We'll make sure we have a placeholder. You said, well, we're not going to be kissing before then anyway, because it's Ramadan and I'm going to be abstaining from that. And I was like, of course. And I knew it was Ramadan, but I had not worked with someone yet who was abstaining from doing a certain act that we were gonna do. I've worked with actors where we've had like food and stuff like that going, and they're like, hey, listen, we're going to have to fake this. We're going to have to shoot around this. And literally we've done it before. And because it was Ramadan, it was like, yep, cool. We figured it out. And it was like, of course, this is a great example of something that it's like, of course we can work around this. Of course we can make this work. And it
Yeah.
worked into the and we also found a gorgeous placeholder that once we put it in, I was like, I think this is better than the kiss. I don't know about you all. Like,
Well, and that's another thing is I also thank you. I love that experience working with you as well. I had so much. There's a lot of reasons why I love that production, but again, working with you was such a new experience for me, and I appreciated how when I told you that, you were like, okay, you're like, it was like it was such not a big deal, and you were like, we don't even have to do the kiss, and I think what that illuminated for me was so often we're seeking out like, oh, what's the juiciest? It's like in stunts or fighting, we want to do the cool tricks.
yeah.
Right? But sometimes it's not necessary. What is the story we're telling? Right? There are so many ways to tell the exact same story.
And what an opportunity for creativity in that moment of like, we got to play with all these other different options. I always brought up that it's like if someone ended up having a cold or someone, I've worked with actors who had friggin' mono. It's like, well, we're not kissing now. So what are we doing instead? Let's find a creative solution. And honestly, I'd say 7 times out of 10, it ends up being cooler than what the kiss was anyway.
I mean, I never realized how intimate holding someone's hand could be. It's so easy. And I mean, it was written in the script, whatever. It's so easy to rush to like, and they kiss. And like, we've seen that a million times, right?
Sure.
That's what the young lovers do. But like, to hold someone's hand and look them in the eye, like how many times can we say that we do that in our lives, period?
Oh, yeah. And that's kind of cool about the process as well, is that these placeholders that we do leading up to the kiss can sometimes just lead to more intimacy when you actually get to the kiss, because you're forced to be with, even to just look at someone in their eyes and take a breath. My God, that immediately draws the people together.
Yeah, exactly. Because now, and the audience is going to pick up on, there's a real connection between these people now. Because, I mean, we've seen it a million times. I saw a play earlier this week. I'm not going to say what it was. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. But there was one moment, there was a kiss, and it felt very forced. Like, it felt like that whole storyline was very rushed. And it was literally to the point where the audience was kind of chanting like kiss, kiss, kiss. Like it felt like this, to me, inorganic moment.
Yeah.
I'm curious overall, because this intimacy coordination is new to our industry, what do you feel like has been the overall reception?
The overall reception has been positive. And where was this? Where was this years ago? We're always going to have those pockets of people that will say, it's weird, I feel strange about it, or I don't like it. In my experience, and I'll just say in my experience, the folks that have tended to have a issue with it, I have found usually have more issues with the intimate scenes and being forced to talk about them. Because there is a bit of disappearing. Yeah. And if you don't talk about it, you can sometimes easily disappear into it and just say, okay, we're just going for it and get it over with. Yeah. And I've worked with some actors who were extremely pushed back at having an intimacy coordinator. They didn't want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it. And it was like, okay, can we at least set boundaries for what we're not going to do? Okay. And like even that. And a lot of them I found probably had a little bit of traumatization from a previous experience, didn't want to talk about it, and even engaging with it was incredibly uncomfortable for them. And, with that, I say that's such a shame, but also I can't force anyone to do something. And, if they asked my opinion or they wanted my opinion, I would say, I think you really need to take a look again at if you really want to do this scene.
Yeah.
Because also, and usually what has made some of these folks come around is when I say, okay, so you don't want to talk about it, but you have a partner you're working with who needs to be kept safe and has boundaries. And you've got a whole crew that wants to make sure that they are not a party to anything funky going on.
Yeah, it's so easy to make it all about us, what you're comfortable with. I mean, you just reminded me I did this project once, and I'll try and keep it as vague as possible because I don't know who's going to end up listening to this. But where I had to kill the other actor, and this other actor, initially the choreography was a choke, a strangulation, and thankfully they felt they had the agency, and they pulled myself and the director aside, and they were like, "I can't have hands on my throat."
Yeah.
Right. And it's a thing that, like, for somebody like myself who has never had somebody actually put their hands on my throat in real life, to me, it just feels like pretend, like no big deal. Like, yeah, of course I'm not really strangling you. And, but that thing, they were fine with literally anything else. I could throw them across the room. I could break a chair on their back. Maybe, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
You know what I'm saying? And so we ended up, and we had to get creative, and we ended up just doing like a pillow suffocation. It told the exact same story. The actor was way more comfortable, so, and again, we keep connecting it to the fight world.
Yeah,
right?
We've got that touchstone, and there's so many similarities to it. I mean, there was something I was going to say. I just had it on the tip of my tongue. I had this in fight classes, being a stage combat teacher, where, teaching knife class, where I had students who had had a knife pulled on them before. Where we had, they took me, and I always put at the beginning of my classes, like, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can pull me aside. These are my office hours. And I invite you to talk about anything that might be funky or might even be a mental block for you in some of these scenes.
Yeah.
And, I had a couple of students be like, listen, I've been held up at knife point before, and I'm really concerned. I want to do this. I'm excited to do this class, but I'm a little concerned. It was like, all right, let's give an exit strategy. Let's talk about what you can, let's talk about how we're going to approach this and what do you need and how we can tap into making sure that you are getting what you need and you have the breaks you need.
Man, I love that we have that process now.
Yeah.
A lot of actors nowadays are multi-hyphenates. Our industry kind of requires it of us. Some people, like, myself, I have a, great interest in movement, fight and movement direction. What advice would you give, or what's the process for an actor who's maybe like, hey, I'd like to do some intimacy coordination or intimacy, choreographing?
Yeah. I would say start educating yourself. You've got lots of options out there. There are multiple companies out there that have intimacy, consent forward artistry, lots of different courses out there that you can do. And a lot of them also have assigned seating. A lot of them have scholarships, etc. But there's also, the working in intimacy work. You got to know the process and you got to know the business a good amount. So even just the more you work as an actor, as a director, as whatever it is that you're going forward with in the theater or film and television industry, that itself is going to give you training for it. So, but there are so many different like master classes out there and online classes you can do. There's a lot of work to make this accessible. So I would say just start Googling, start looking at companies, start talking to friends who have taken classes at other companies, and start educating yourself.
And does your organization, does IDC do trainings?
Oh yeah. We have a whole online portal called the Consent Studio that you can be a part of and get a bunch of different documents about consent forward artistry. There's the Consent Forward Artist program that you can take as a director, as an actor, as wherever you land in the industry. And then there's also a certification for intimacy direction for theater, intimacy coordination for film and television. I don't think everyone has to be certified. I think it's a great program and process that allows you to, it's just like, again, just like stage combat. Not everyone has to be certified, but educate yourself. Make sure that you're true to you about making sure you know what's going on before going in and doing this job.
Nice. Okay, cool. Now, kind of the golden question. For the actors that I have on the show, I ask them about what qualities that they bring to their storytelling that sets them apart. For you, as somebody who works with, who directs actors, who choreographs for actors, what are the qualities that actors have brought to the table that makes them enjoyable to work with, right? Or I guess you could also answer the opposite. What makes them not enjoyable to work with? Like who are those actors that when they arrive on set and you start working with them, you're like, yes, thank God.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to generalize it, but basically as soon as I know I've got a Gen Z actor, I'm like, yes. like it's, yeah.
They're with the program.
Well, my God, they have more consent, education than, most mature actors, many mature actors combined. Openness is a big thing. When an actor comes to the table, and curiosity is a phenomenal aspect to have as an actor. And when someone is like, oh, tell me about that, or I'm interested in that, because that not only artistically, but collaboratively, it can be absolutely incredible. It's interesting because with that, there's a part of me that wants to say an actor that knows what they want, that like knows their process. But even if you don't, because if an actor knows their process, they're like, well, these are the things that I need. I'm like, great, I can work with that. But even if they don't, that ability to say, I don't know, is incredible, because then I know that we can figure it out together.
Amazing. And finally, what's your favorite project?
Oh,
that
man.
you've coordinated?
That's so not fair.
I know, which is why I have to ask it. You can give a top 2 or 3 if you need to.
Okay. I mean, I will always go back to the Deuce because it was such a special, and it was the first major production that I hired an intimacy coordinator, and it was my Olympics. I tell every intimacy coordinator that's coming up that I'm mentoring, like, you will have your Olympics. Your Olympics will show up. Mine was the Deuce. I got to base so much of my practice on how we figured out how to work with that cast and that crew. So also it was such an emotional ride. Everyone was on board. Everyone just wanted to make sure that everyone was safe and that we told a good story. So yeah, and that's a crew that I will go on set and I will see someone from the camera team and just be like, ah, and that there is a bond from that cast and crew that we all carry, and also everyone knows, because it got so much press, that it was the first production that had an intimacy coordinator, and everyone's very proud of it. So I'll get random selfies from other intimacy coordinators on set with like wardrobe and costumes from, and they're like, hey, I'm here with Randy, a camera,
I love it.
So that, yeah, I think I'll go with the Deuce.
Amazing. I love it. Well, Alicia, I think that intimacy direction is a godsend. I think it makes it easier for us actors to step into the work as well as step away from the work. At the end of the day, there's less concern around being traumatized because some actor decided to follow their impulses, But I also love that it provides space for actors to follow their impulses, right? Like both things are able to be true. So thank you for your expertise. Thank you for what you've contributed to our industry as a whole, for filling this void in our business. And thank you for joining me on the show today, giving me a glimpse into your process.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Actor's Instrument. I'm Hassiem Mohammed, and you can follow me at Hassiem Mohammed and the show at Actor's Instrument Podcast on all social media platforms. The Actor's Instrument is a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. Executive producers, Adam Jellicourse, Serena Esposito, and yours truly. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check us out at theactorsinstrument.com. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.